Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Kim Foster, and I serve as the Chief Financial Officer in our diocese. It's truly wonderful to see so many of you here with us today. Your commitment to this important work is very much appreciated. And we do understand that many of you here today have been called on quite unexpectedly to serve as a member of your parish audit committee without any prior training or experience in this area. It is our intention that today's workshop will provide a clear framework and will empower and inspire you to tackle this important work with confidence, efficiency, and ease. I'm pleased to introduce to you Betsy Blandon. Betsy was referred to me by the CFO of the Diocese of Massachusetts, where Betsy serves as the chair of the Congregational Consultants. And that is a group of knowledgeable, experienced individuals from congregations throughout the Diocese of Massachusetts who collectively assist congregations in a variety of ways. Betsy is an experienced parish treasurer herself and has conducted audits for many churches in the eastern part of the state. She also coaches internal audit committees and has conducted webinars and trainings on how to conduct internal audits. Betsy?
Okay. So, good morning, everyone. And I'm like no kind of public speaker, so I'm totally going to be reading my notes. And that's what you get. So, good morning, everyone. I'm Betsy Blandon, and welcome to this webinar on the wonderful world of parish audits. I'm glad you could join us this morning. Before I start really talking, I have a few logistical notes. One, a copy of my slides will be available on the diocesan website, and I believe it's going to get emailed to you as well. We are recording, as you probably know, and a link to that will be available as well up on the diocesan YouTube channel, I think. And that's in the slides. If you have questions after this meeting, please contact Kim Foster, and she will gather them up for me to deal with. Please hold your questions to the end. It's really easy to distract me, and I'm passionate about this stuff, and I will go right down the rabbit hole. So you try not to distract me. Also, please stay on mute because I'm not kidding about being distractible. And I will totally eavesdrop on your background conversation. So also, I tend to talk faster and faster. So let Vicky X know in the chat that I've done that, and she will interrupt me and get me to slow it down. So in order to remember why it is that we're doing all this, let us pray. Almighty and ever-living God, source of all wisdom and understanding, be present with those who take counsel for the renewal and mission of your church. Teach us in all things to seek first your honor and glory. Guide us to perceive what is right, and grant us both the courage to pursue it and the grace to accomplish it. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. So, back to the program. I'm going to do this right. I know it. That's visible, correct? All right. All right, so yes, internal audit training. This is the link to where it will be. And it did not advance for me. There we go. A few words about me. My background is in math and engineering, so numbers tell me a story. But I'm not any kind of an accountant. I need to rearrange things on my screen here. This is not working. Okay. It's inevitable that I am a current and a former parish treasurer in two very small parishes in Newton, Massachusetts. I'm also currently the chair of the Eastern Massachusetts Diocesan Consultants, and we're a group of volunteers that offer our experience to the various parishes of the diocese. Not only do we provide financial advice and strategic planning, but we also help with search and priest in charge processes and things like conflict resolution. I could go on, but it might be best to look at the website listed in the slides. Most relevant to this discussion, I'm an experienced Episcopal Church auditor in the Diocese of Eastern Massachusetts. And if you're like me and like numbers, then my spreadsheet says that I've performed more than 100 audits in the last 5 years. And I really should have not looked at that. That's a lot. If you're a member of the Parish Audit Committee, thank you for signing up for this job. Not only are you helping the parish meet the canonical requirement, you are assuring proper stewardship of the parish assets. Those assets support the church's mission in the world. And if you are someone who gets woozy when presented with a column of numbers, you have a place in this process, because we look at both the very big picture and the granular financial detail. And most of my presentation is addressed to you, the committee members. If you're here as a treasurer, thank you so much for signing up for that role. Your willingness to take on this responsibility is a blessing to your parish. And even if it doesn't always feel that way, I know from experience that undergoing the audit can feel like getting like a financial x-ray where your every decision is being scrutinized very closely. Even though you do not serve on the audit committee, my hope is that this presentation will let you know what will happen and how to prepare to make the process as smooth and relatively painless as possible. If you're here for any other reason, then I hope you find the presentation informative and helpful. Go back here. There. So let's talk about the audit. I always tell people that the audit process laid out in the Episcopal Manual of Business Methods isn't a real audity type audit. It's not like the IRS or anything. For the most part, this audit isn't something that can be failed, but it can point out areas for improvement. The MBM does lay out how to get through this process, although it leaves out a lot of detail. It is your job to look at the financial processes and systems of the parish to ascertain whether there are enough controls in place so that an error or a nefarious action would come to light. The chances that you will uncover actual malfeasance using this process, pretty small. Having said that, I should reveal I have a superpower. When I randomly select transactions to inspect, I will inevitably find the one time that the treasurer didn't file a utility bill or something completely regular and normal. In Monday's audit interview, it was a small bill for lectionary inserts. You may or may not have this odd superpower. Okay. What have I done here? This is not right. Yes, there we are. Sorry. My advice is to approach this process starting at an overview level and gradually increasing the detail that you are inspecting. This means that you should get an understanding of what the systems are and how they should work before you launch into the minutia of how the water bill exactly gets paid. So the steps in an audit are request and receive the documents, read a lot, select the transactions you're going to inspect, schedule the audit, do the interview, do the inspection, write the report, and then there's a bunch of aftermath. Request and receive documents. All right. Before you launch into an interview and inspection, you will need to do some preparation. If you have not received the vestry minutes, the annual reports, and the detailed transaction list, please request them immediately. If there are assets that might not have a year-end statement, like savings accounts or CDs, then request those balances using the provided forms. If there are loans, request the year-end loan balance. There's a document provided for that in your audit package. Now, starting in on the reading. Okay. Read the vestry minutes, all of them for the year. Look for budget approval. Look for a motion to accept the results of the audit. If your church does this, look for the housing allowance approval at the end of the year. Look for evidence that any large expenditures were brought before the vestry. Look for bids on projects. Ensure that there are approvals that state the name of the vendor and the amount authorized. See that the vestry sees an income and expense versus budget report every month. This might be called profit and loss or statement of activity. There's a bunch of names for it. See that the vestry sees a balance sheet at least quarterly, and it should list the balance of every single asset of the parish. The balance sheet might also be called a statement of position. I don't know why there's all these names. I'm not an accountant. Okay, next, read the annual report from that covers the previous audit year, or the previous year. Is there, yeah, and then read the one that covers the previous year and the audit year, sorry. Is there a written summary of the year from the treasurer's perspective? Is there a written summary of the upcoming budget? Is there an income and expense versus budget report covering the audit year? Is there a complete balance sheet? And since you've read the vestry minutes, did the annual reports accurately, convey what happened during the church year? Okay. Next, read through any policies that you can get your hands on. Is there a manual for the financial policies and procedures? Are the bylaws less than 10 years old? Is there information about any restrictions to the endowments / investments / trusts that the parish benefits from? Can anyone lay hands on the deed to the parish property? How about the articles of incorporation? Read through the previous audit report. Read through any previous audit working papers. You will want to be familiar with the past audit recommendations because you will need to comment on whether or not they've been met. Everyone should read through the internal controls questionnaire and the model audit program. That way you know what questions you will have to answer. All right, and now we're on to selecting transactions. Now, somebody has to look at some numbers because you need to select transactions to inspect. The finance team should have provided you with a spreadsheet with detailed transactions for the year. This document might be called the general ledger or detailed transactions or check register. There's a lot of names for this too. It should list every single thing that happened in the accounting system for the entire year. If you get a printout or a PDF, you can work with this, but a spreadsheet makes everybody's life easier. So make your life easier and create a spreadsheet, a separate spreadsheet named something like 2024 transactions to inspect. Then copy and paste the relevant lines from the ledger into your spreadsheet so you can have all your transactions you want to see in one place. If you've got a manual, a paper printout of all the transactions, you're going to need to manually transfer the information for the transactions you choose into your spreadsheet. Great. All right. So from this detailed list of transactions, you're going to choose 12 to 16 expenses and 8 to 12 deposits. I choose a few from January starting mid-month to avoid any previous year-end stuff. Then I choose a few from July since that's a lull in the program year. I choose more from October since the program year should be up and moving at that point. And then I choose some in December to see how the year winds up and to make sure that the year-end deposits happened, in all the holiday flurry. Choose large deposits and small ones. For expenses, choose both usual ones like utilities or insurance, as well as unusual ones like building work. If you do have a spreadsheet of transactions, the transactions of the parish, you can filter the transaction type so you only see payments or deposits in order to make your selection easier. And then you filter or search the transaction list for transfers, choose a handful of those. Filter or search the ledger for the names of anyone on the finance team. Copy and paste those into the spreadsheet. If there are a lot, note that and choose a representative sample. Now search the ledger for the word void. Copy and paste or write those transactions into your spreadsheet. If there seem to be a lot, note that and choose like half a dozen. Okay. Now comes the paper part, and you could probably do this electronically if you like. I do it on paper. It makes my life easier so that I'm not staring at the computer while I'm talking. Once you've got your transactions document in good condition, make sure it's readable on paper. My experience says to print out three copies. You should think through your workflow in case you need more. The person doing the inspection needs a copy, and the other copies go to the people who have to fetch and carry all the background, all the backup paperwork. And it might seem really efficient, but you should not provide the document to the treasurer ahead of the inspection. They could then go and, make sure they have invoices for everything. So it does seem efficient. Don't do it though. Print out the balance sheet for the end of the audit year and the end of the previous year. You probably only need one copy to keep your notes on. Print out the previous recommendations, print out the ICQ and the model audit program, and gather any notes you've made during the reading portion of the preparation. Maybe I didn't say this, but when I'm reading minutes, if there's an action I want to take, I make a square. And if something is great, I put a star next to it, like, oh, I found the housing allowance, star. If there's something that seems a little sketchy to me, I'll make an exclamation point so I remember to come back to it. You probably have your own method for this. So back to all that paper, bring something to write on. Sparkly ink is not required, but it makes the job more interesting. You might want to deputize a member of the committee to take notes, but it doesn't hurt for everyone to make notes because we all notice different things. The stack of paper or the electronic document should be what you need to do the interview and the inspection. So now I've put scheduling after preparation, but you can schedule as you prepare because it could take a while to align everyone's schedules. A schedule also might be incentive to get the preparation done. I know it is for me. Who should attend this interview? Obviously, the treasurer should be there. If there is a separate bookkeeper, their input could be valuable. If there is a finance, investment, endowment committee, a member might have valuable input. In my experience, clergy and lay leadership find the overview and controls part of the interview to be enlightening, at least the first time they go through it. Often their perception of the process sheds light on where the process could be improved. Specifically, did enough people see into what's happening? For instance, could a check signer write a check that nobody else knows about? If a check fell out of the plate or out of the deposit bag, who would notice? When the interview starts to get very detailed, now exactly when is that check endorsed? Clergy and leadership may and often do check right out. Generally, the interview takes about an hour or so. The inspection can take arbitrary amounts of time depending on how well the paperwork is organized. Plan for 4 hours, but it will probably be less time. Okay. So what happens during the interview? You can just launch right into the internal controls questionnaire if you want. I like to keep the process conversational. So I go over 15, and you can count as we go, topics in this order. 1, how was the year? Highs, lows. This could be strictly financial, but it might cover parish programs or building work. You're just getting a feel for what's been going on and how the treasurer or leadership feels about it. 2, who has a hand in the finances? Not just the treasurer, but anyone else. Do you have somebody whose sole job it is to take the deposit to the bank, for instance? Do you have a separate bookkeeper? Do you not have a separate bookkeeper? Like that. 3, who works for the parish? When is the housing allowance approved? 4, is there an inventory of church property? Has the property insurance coverage been looked at recently? Look at the internal controls questionnaire for a listing of coverage that there ought to be there. What are the backup procedures on the parish computers? Is there a disaster recovery plan? 5, financial assets of the church. So go over all those financial assets to find out who has signature authority and who might have online access. Include checking, savings, investments, CDs, credit cards, debit cards, PayPal, Square, Venco, or any other like credit card processor. Ideally, if you're lucky, the parish has a document covering this, which would be super helpful at this point, or you can recommend creating one in the future. All right, 6. Where are the personnel files kept? Please say it's in a locked cabinet. What is stored for each employee? And again, see the internal controls questionnaire for what should be there. 7. Who are the building users? Where are the building use agreements stored? Are there certificates of insurance for each group that uses the building? You can leave out scouts and recovery programs. Usually church insurance has ideas about that they're part of your mission. Number 8. Now we're getting more detailed, and it's time to look at the oversight and controls. Who reconciles the accounting system to the bank statements? If this is a person who has signature authority, somebody who could have signed the checks that they're then saying are or are not in the system, who looks at the reconciliation reports afterwards? Who makes the journal entries in the accounting system? Since these can change the financial statements, it's important that the entries are at least well documented, and there should be oversight. Who has that oversight? Who can initiate electronic transfers? Who would catch it if one went to the Betsy Goes to Aruba fund? Who has oversight of the rector's discretionary account? There should absolutely be someone who can affirm that there is no operating or personal activity in that account. And the procedures for this oversight vary by parish, but there must be a process. Interviews. Okay, so here we are. My hope is that all of our parishes have income. Yay! What is the procedure for counting the income? This includes not only the plate, but also those checks that arrive in the mail. It could also include fundraisers, electronic payments, all of it. So in the event it's actual physical, where is the money held prior to counting and deposit? You would like it to be locked up and endorsed, but that doesn't always happen. Sometimes it's, oh yeah, it's in the treasurer's mailbox. It's on the parish administrator's desk. This is not optimal. How many people count? Should be 2. Is there a signed sheet? Do the counters change? Are they unrelated? Who endorses the checks? When? Who takes the deposit to the bank? What is retained in all the counting documentation? Are any pledge envelopes or, things that come with the checks, the check stubs, are those retained? What is retained for online documentation? How often is it entered into the system? Is it like a monthly download, or does the email come in and somebody downloads that? How often is it transferred to the bank? What is the system for recording pledges? There's a number of different systems, including pen and paper, people use for this, but how are donations tracked? When are the donations or the pledge payments recorded in there? Are online donations recorded there? Is the entire online donation recorded? The fees should not be taken out. So if you gave a donation of $100 via PayPal, even though the church sees $98.50 or whatever it is, the donor should see that they donated $100. How often are the pledge statements sent? Should be quarterly. Okay, and now, sadly, we get to expenses. As a treasurer, I don't like those. How are budgeted expenses handled? Are they just paid no matter the amount? Or is there an approval process? How about unbudgeted expenses? Is this always brought to the vestry? Or is there a threshold for that? As a specific example, if the hot water heater goes belly up, what would the process for the installation of a new one look like? Are large or unbudgeted expenses in the vestry minutes, right? You should be able to answer that by this point. Is there a dollar amount threshold for 2 signatures on a check? Or more appropriately these days, 2 approvals on an expense? What happens to voided checks? They should be retained. As a, in your private life, you probably think they ought to be shredded, but not for being a parish treasurer. What happens to outdated checks? After about 6 months, they should be voided, and they should be researched and reissued as necessary. Is there a petty cash system? This is less and less likely these days. If yes, look into the internal controls questionnaire for the questions you got to ask. Usually these days, people give debit cards to the parish admin or whoever was doing petty cash before. Are checks written to cash? Let's hope not, but sometimes they are for fundraiser purposes. But if they are, ask what safeguards there are for that. Okay. All right. All right. Are there any loans? Did the vestry approve them? Is the loan balance in the liability section of the balance sheet? Number 12, who oversees the investments? Do they have minutes from any meetings they have? Or how are their decisions documented? Is there documentation of any fund restrictions? Is there an investment policy? Are the investment balances updated at least quarterly for the balance sheet to the vestry? Are they following that investment policy? 13, in the home stretch. I usually ask the finance team to look at the ICQ ahead of time. They should be ready to tell you where the answer is no. That makes it really fast to go through with the treasurer. They'd say, this is a no, the no's should be infrequently. So they should be able to tell you quickly where their no's are. You will also have ideas about the no answers, and definitely by the end of the inspections, you will. 14, go over the previous audit recommendations. Ask what the status is. In progress, not started, considered, not of value. You just get a reading from the treasurer on what that is. 15, ask, is there anything else we should know? You would be surprised how often there's an answer that ends up in the notes or the recommendations. So always ask that. It's worth, hearing the treasurer's thoughts. And then it's a good time for a break in the audit proceedings. Walk around, think about what you heard, because now it's going to get really detailed. Okay. This is where it's great that you have multiple members of the audit committee, because you can divide and conquer. I do this all by myself, so it takes a while. These jobs can all be done by one person, but it goes faster if you work in parallel. I'm seeing an increase in online documentation storage, and if that's the case in your parish, some of this work can be done at home. So one member of the committee should receive all the possible year-end statements that you can lay your hands on for the audit year. If the reconciliations for the bank statements are separate, request those for all those bank statements. So you have reconciliation reports and statement. Now for every asset on that balance sheet that you printed out, make sure the balance matches either the statement or the register balance in the reconciliation report. And when I say every asset, I mean it. Bank accounts, savings accounts, CDs, investments, building value, altar guild, ECW, preschool. If it's a legal asset of the parish, it should be on that sheet, and you should have a look. If an asset isn't on the balance sheet, note that for the audit. Once the balance sheet check is done, choose a few statements from the year to make sure that the reconciliations do not show any transactions that have been outstanding for a long time. And by a long time, I mean 6 months. I did see a balance sheet that looked odd, and it turns out there were unvoided transactions dating back 20 years. You really don't want to see that, but you won't, I'm sure of it. Okay, now inspect expenses, or do this, while one person is doing statements. A member of the finance team should be able to relatively quickly locate the documentation for all the expenses in your transactions to inspect document. One audit committee member should receive the paperwork, checking it off on the list. Check that every expense has the original bill, any approvals, and the check number or the stub, if applicable. If there are payments to members of the finance team, check that someone else approved the payment. Okay. Inspecting income. This is a little more involved. And again, the counting and deposit information should be readily available for the dates chosen in transactions to inspect. Again, check these off the list as they come in. For every deposit, you should see a counting sheet, a listing of donations, ideally from the pledge recording system, pledge envelopes or other documentation, and a bank receipt. The counting sheet total, the listing of donations, and the bank receipt or bank statement should all match. If there are rental payments, it would be awesome if those went into the pledge system. That's not usual these days. So the donation listing might not have the same total as everything else. Right now, so you need to trace the checks that came in. So ideally, there are copies of all the checks because you need to trace the check through the accounting system to the bank and into the donation recording system. Also, a deposit slip listing all the checks would be awesome. Again, not required. So from the photocopies or the counting sheet or the deposit slip, pick 2 checks and try to pick both pledge payments and other types like flowers or Easter. Ensure that you see them in the pledge recording and the deposit slip. Make sure you're seeing it in all the places. The check made it all the way through, all the way into the bank and all the way into the donation recording system, if applicable. I usually put a check mark on one side of the amount if all the paper is there, and I put a check mark for each check that I trace on the other side. And that way you know how many samples you took. For an electronic donation, trace from the notification of payment to make sure it's included in the pledge donation system. Make sure the entire donation is recorded. Again, the fee is not subtracted from on the pledge statement. All right, that's it for looking at checks. All right. Whichever audit committee member is free at this point should look at the voids noted in transactions to inspect. If the voided check is available, yay, awesome, that's great. If not, ask for an explanation. It could have been mailed and not returned. If checks should be there and they aren't, note that for the audit. Have a look at the transfers that the committee chose. Is there an explanation for why it occurred, written in the documentation, or ask, if there's no explanation, then make a note for the audit. There ought to be something in the memo in the accounting system that says this was made so we can pay our bills. All right. We're getting towards the end. All right. The profit and loss in the parochial report. Remember the profit and loss, statement of activity, income and expense, it's got all those names. Have a look at it for the year. Does it line up with what you have seen so far? If there's a line that's way off from the budget, ask about it. And then have a look at the parochial report, the financial section. Do the answers in that section line up with the profit and loss report for the year? Again, this is a check you can often do at home. You can trace things and see if they went in the right place. Again, ask again. Anything we should know? Because the process can shake loose things in the mind of the treasurer. And at this point, you have probably concluded the in-person part of the audit process, and it's time to write the report. Okay. Now, how you do this as a group, it's a group project. We all know how those go. So you can choose how you're going to set this up. The product of this whole endeavor is a certificate of completed audit that will be submitted to the diocese. And again, you get to divide up the labor here. It might be beneficial to have one person go through the internal controls questionnaire and the model audit program, putting in answers as they can. Then have a meeting to go over those results. If you have this meeting online, then you can share the document on the screen so everybody can see any changes as you go. After that meeting, one person could draft their certificate, or you can work on it together. Again, a shared screen can be helpful. So some notes on filling out the certificate of completed audit. Anytime there's a no or an NA answer in the ICQ or the model audit, you should make a note in the certificate. Generally, a no man answer means that there should be a recommendation to fix the issue. Anything that was noted in the preparation, interview, or inspection portions of the process should make it into the report. Like there's no glittery star next to house, for a housing allowance. You should definitely say approve a housing allowance if you do that in your parish. If you need to note that a person has responsibility for anything, use their title. This will help to the write-up next year, and it helps to separate the person from the role. Personally, seeing the treasurer recorded an incorrect investment balance with a variance of $70,000 looks better than Betsy underreported the investment balance. Yes, I did this and it wasn't caught until the audit. It was so embarrassing. And it points out the oversight of the journal entry so that doesn't happen. Any recommendations from the past that were not met should be repeated on the certificate of audit. And I personally separate the notes and the recommendations just so it's easier for parish leadership to see the work that needs to be done, the recommendations, since it's the responsibility of all of leadership to have proper controls in place. It's not just the treasurer's job. It's all of leadership needs to be paying attention to this. Aftermath. So when the certificate is finished, bundle it up with the ICQ and the year-end income expense and the balance sheet reports. This bundle goes to parish leadership because the vestry will need to officially accept the results. Then you can congratulate yourselves. Good job, you. Out of your hands. All right, parish leadership. They're going to need to take over here. Leadership should send the certificate, the ICQ, the year-end financials, and the vestry minutes from the audit acceptance to the diocese. Once the year-end financial results are officially audited and accepted, leadership should file with the Secretary of the Commonwealth following the annual report, using the annual report filing document that was in the audit materials. Instructions for that, for both these procedures were sent with the audit information. So there we go. And oh my gosh, I have been talking for a while. At this point, we have a few options. I could just take questions. We could look at the ICQ or model audit procedure together in case there are questions on what the individual items mean. Or I could regale you with odd things I've come across and we could discuss what went wrong. So.
Betsy, it's Vicky. I have a question for you already here.
Excellent.
Kathy writes, most people at our church give via ACH.
Awesome.
Very few people, hold on a second. Very few people use pledge envelopes.
Excellent.
Why do we need to keep the envelopes? Also, why are copies of the checks needed? Our process of checks and balances simply matches the counter sheets with the online donation system. A monthly sync is done between the pledge treasurer's records and the bookkeeper's QuickBooks records.
Mm-hmm. Right. I like check photocopies, and not everybody does them, because if somebody says to me, I wrote you a check and it has not showed up, I can then look in the photocopies and say, oh, look, it got logged off to somebody else's pledge statement. Or I can kind of figure out where the problem happened. In your case, there's not a lot of checks to photocopy anyway. Go you, that's awesome. What else would I say about that?
Do you have to keep using the envelopes? That was the other piece of her question.
If you have donors who use them, you have to retain their envelopes. You are not required to give them out. I don't anymore. I have two people who would like them, and I print out monthly envelopes for them. I make them for them.
Oh, that's great. Okay, I think
it's wicked expensive for those stupid envelopes that nobody uses. Sorry.
that's okay. I think you hit all those points in her question. Michael writes, you mentioned a question regarding the age of the bylaws.
Yes.
Can you explain the significance of that?
Okay. Somebody says,
and Jack is jumping in to say we don't have bylaws in Western Massachusetts, which is true.
okay, this is a cultural difference.
Yes, it is.
Okay, we're all required to have bylaws, and if they're more than 10 years old, they probably do not speak to remote meetings, email votes, all that kind of stuff. So we, in Eastern Massachusetts, we have templates for bylaws that you're supposed to use, and it has to go before a standing committee. But that's where we are.
Okay, Elizabeth asks, if you keep copies of the checks, are they secured?
They
It
better
is
be.
it is a liability issue if those
Yes.
copies can be easily accessed.
Yes. Yeah. No, that stuff better be locked up.
Okay. No more questions so far in the chat.
Right. And I would also say increasingly banks scan the checks, and you can probably figure out a way to use that. I'm working on the process for that for my parish.
Wonderful. Oh, new question.
Thanks,
Jack said I was just going to say that.
Yep.
So you've got some knowledgeable people here.
Yay.
Would you like to go to gallery view and watch for hands for a few minutes?
Sure.
Okay, great. Let's do that.
Take the spotlight up my big head. Okay. I have a really big monitor, so my head looks really big when I'm up there.
If you want to use the raise hand function, that's great. You can unmute yourself, friends, to ask your question.
Is there something else you wanted me to cover? Are you feeling like you can do this? You are empowered. Go you. Okay, I got a thumbs up, so yay.
Betsy, this has been great. You gave us a very good cookbook on how to go through all this stuff. For me, it's been time very well spent. I want to thank you for your presentation. And do we know where to find you in case we have questions?
Well, you should pitch it off to Kim, because I field a lot of emails just from my side of Massachusetts. So it'd be good if she could batch them up. If you need an in-depth conversation, sure, we can talk. Not a problem.
Betsy, I have a question.
Yeah.
Did you say at the outset that you'd be sending this PowerPoint to everybody?
Yes.
Okay, it would have been helpful to me to have it up front,
Okay.
to have a copy as you were going through it,
Okay.
so that I could make whatever notes I needed to make on those pages as you were going through.
Okay.
Just as a helpful, but I'll be appreciative to get it.
Excellent. Okay.
Hey, Betsy, to follow up on Joe's previous question there, even though you might not be available, it might be helpful, and I don't know if the diocese would be willing to share the names of the audit committee members around the diocese, and maybe we could just reach out to them as well, just to see what their best practice might be on some of this stuff.
So to create a network of folks that are serving as on the parish audit committees, to create a network where you could reach out to one another. Is that what you're saying? Yes.
Yeah, exactly. That would be great.
Vicky, do we have is there a way to extract all the names and email addresses from the Zoom registration?
We have that, Kim, and that's how I'm going to email the slides out.
Okay. We'll look into it, Chris. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a great
thanks.
suggestion.
List of, yeah, the list of people that registered for this presentation are not going to be necessarily the full list of people that are doing the auditing.
Mhm.
Right, very true. Yeah. We've not yet received back all the auditor appointment forms, so we don't have complete information as to who, who's doing what at this point.
Betsy, Steve says he would like to see the CA and process document.
CA and process documents, meaning,
ICA, he corrected, ICA.
the ICQ?
ICQ, I guess
Internal
that's,
controls questionnaire should have gone out in your, the audit packet that came from the diocese.
Yes,
You can also look in the, just Google up the Episcopal Manual of Business Methods, and it's in there.
and it's also on our website under resources for parish for financial resources. You'll find all the entire audit packet there can be downloaded.
Excellent.
Everett has a question.
Just a question, a point. If we do share emails, at least for me, I have one simple request is when you reply, don't reply all, please. In my case, if you reply all, I have email filters that will automatically blacklist it and I'll never see it. Because I maintain websites for the church, for a band, for a lodge. I get a ton of emails, so I'm very aggressive at filtering and blacklisting. And when I blacklist, it's not, in my case, it's not spam. I have front end filters that it doesn't even get to my email product. So
Yes.
please, I don't mind answering questions. I'm a retired accountant and an IT guy. I was asked to be on an audit committee for a church in the Western Diocese that we're partners with. I'm part of the Eastern, which that's kind of unique in and of itself. But that being said, the only other question I had was more of towards the ACH question and a curiosity.
Mhm.
Does that particular environment actually have a direct ACH connection from banks? Or are you referring to people just issuing checks electronically that get delivered to the church? It's pretty unusual to be able to accept a direct ACH.
It's not unusual now. You can do it. You can do it via some of the pledge recording systems. So I see ACH and all the different credit cards as well as checks for me to my parish. So it's a thing that can happen now.
So it's a direct deposit to the bank?
Yep,
Okay.
it's pretty awesome. I have to say that the automation of these things makes my job as a treasurer a lot easier, and a lot less fraught because the checks or ACH are just happen automatically every month. So I do not see a summer dip in income.
Sorry, I had a kitten climb in the curtain.
Oh, nice. Is that it?
Nothing in the chat. I don't see any hands.
Okay. I see that Steve Hasbrook is on the call. Do you want to say anything? You're muted.
Vicky.
Mute. There we go. I appreciate, Betsy, what you've gone over. I really do. And I think this will help folks go forward in this time.
And hopefully it can give you more of a break.
I'm on temporary retirement right now, so I am taking the break.
Yes. Excellent. All right.
Betsy, can you repeat where the packet to download is?
It will go. It's up on the diocesan website. Isn't that under treasurer financial resources?
The video, oh, the packet is under, it's under, yes, parish resources in the financial section, yes.
So did you mean the audit information that went out in January, or did you mean the completed packet? The completed audit
The video, or what are you referring
stuff?
to?
The uncompleted packet.
Ah, okay. All right. Vicky, can you try? She's got it. She's on it. It's in the chat.
Oh, okay, because folks from the Western Diocese would be, I don't know if it's on their website or they have to go to Boston to see it.
Oh, no. This is on the Western Diocese one.
On our website,
Oh, okay.
yes.
Oh, there it is, dynamite.
Yeah. And Eastern Diocese does their audit differently. So we use the checklist in the Manual of Business Methods. So it's a little different than the model audit process that you guys have. So that was some learning for me. Well, this is your last chance. Any questions? No? Okay, go in peace to love and serve the Lord.